Hey, Hungen. Sec ST. Hungen. The live stream is okay. Dispensado, the live stream appears to be working now. I'm just going to double check to make sure. Again, and again, Matsotsugi Facebook, it's working on Facebook. And let's check YouTube. All right. YouTube. Again, we are live. Biba, biba, biba. Okay. All right. Hafede todos hamzug bueno hudzong estigi un nuevo na episode Fanachu. Hello to everyone out there. This is another episode of Fanachu. And so Guawi host Midzutalo si Michael Hanbavakwa. I'm once again your host. And one of the things that we love to talk about Fanachu, because Fanachu deals with all sorts of topics. It deals with issues of decolonization in terms of culture, in terms of politics. It deals with Chamorro stories, right? But one of the things that I really enjoy about having this platform is using it for solidarity purposes, is that Guam is one of a number of non-self-governing territories in the world, and it is one of 6 sort of territories of the United States. Although if we've had a little bit too much to drink already and we're being a little more truthful, we might want to say colonies, right? And so, but we are one of those. And the question that I always want to put out there to people, and the question that I always the question that always kind of keeps me up at night is, why don't we know more about the other territories of the United States? You know, part of it could be blamed on distance, because some of the territories are far apart from each other. It could be blamed on limited media options, because as we know, we've talked about here on Fanachu in Guam, we've seen media shrinkage in recent years where media has disappeared. And so there's less chance for stories that connect us. But one of the things that activists in these territories have strived to do, though, is reach out with solidarity networks to know about what is going on in other territories. What have they been doing to push their own issues of self-determination, their own campaigns for political rights, for political status change, or to protect their current political status, if that's what they prefer. And so I love when Fanachu becomes a solidarity episode and we can learn about what is happening in other places, because you know, we have to, you know, I think that one of the transformative things is when your average person in Guam wakes up in the morning and kind of knows what's going on in Puerto Rico, or your average person in the Virgin Islands is aware of what the people in the CNMI are thinking about, you know, what they're worried about. And so the 2 guests that I have today, who come from a new group, they have a lot of activities and events going on this year to launch Right to Democracy. You know, these are 2 people who are tackling this issue of sort of the atomization of the territories, how bringing them together into sort of a national effort to sort of push for self-determination, right? And so I'm so thankful to have them here with me. And so, Neil, do you want to go first? Neil, who's been on Fanachu before, do you want to go first and go ahead and introduce yourself? And then Adi, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then tell us about this project.
Thanks, Miguel. Great to be back on Fanachu. It's been about 1.5 years since I was on the program with my friend and colleague, Charles Alaima from American Samoa, who's actually on the board of our new organization, Right to Democracy. Going to be very excited to be coming back home to Guam at the end of the month. Addie and I are going to be making our way out to talk with folks in the community and have some events as we look to learn and engage more with people on Guam and other territories. Also going to be making our way up to the Northern Mariana Islands and as well for kind of our Pacific tour. And yeah, just have been thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Addie Martínez-Román to co-found this new organization, Right to Democracy, which expands on some of the work that I've been doing over the years to really focus more directly on broader issues of confronting and dismantling U.S. colonialism and the legal colonial frameworks that govern people in all of the territories. So I'll stop with that there and let Addie introduce herself a little bit as well.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Hola. I hope you're all well. Here in Puerto Rico, it's nighttime. And I think we share how hot it is because we're having a heat wave definitely affecting us lately. So I am so excited to be here today. My name is Addie Martínez-Román. I was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. And I have been working for a long time as a community lawyering, which has been an approach that I have been convinced that is able to promote social change in communities. Nevertheless, being from Puerto Rico, the issues that communities, low-income communities face are always tied with our relationship with the United States. And many of the barriers that we find when trying to insert community leaders, when trying to insert organizations in the ground into actually affecting change, many of the barriers I've come to learn that have an insidious reason not to go forward. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that insidious reason, and this is what we're working on now. So I have decided to embark in this new work after directing other nonprofits that related to access to justice, community development, and also sustainable, resilient recovery from disasters. Because the frustration that I was feeling from the walls that we have been bumping to when trying to advance agency of our people, of our communities in the decision-making process of the things that affect them. And I met Neil. Neil approached me on his approach of litigation to confront the colonial framework, the legal framework that makes us a colony. And we don't have to drink too much to recognize how this legal framework is colonial. If not, Neil and I would be drunk every day because of how strong it is and how we work to try to dismantle that. And so yes, we decided to share our professional efforts in a co-directorship, creating a new organization that would attend to this problem from the top down, we say, like from the litigation point of view, but also by inserting a bottom-up approach, inserting more community lawyering, client-centeredness, and participatory advocacy in our efforts. And yes, we'll talk more about that today for sure.
And I would say, go ahead.
Oh, no, Sidus Masi, and thank you to you both. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, that as we've been talking with communities throughout the territories, we've already, been out engaging in Puerto Rico and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Addie's actually heading back out to the Virgin Islands, I think, later this week. One of the things that's really been clear to us is just how much of a foundation has already been laid on these issues over the years in terms of advancing issues of decolonization and self-determination. And so we absolutely recognize, the work that has gone into these issues over the many years. And I know, particularly in Guam, when you and I first started talking about these issues back in 2005, I think we would have been hard pressed to have a podcast about these issues that anybody would have tuned into and listened to. But through the hard work of, community leaders, folks such as yourselves, now there's a thriving podcast and, meetings monthly and, people talking and writing and thinking about these important issues. And that's been really exciting to see. And I'm going to be really excited to have, to see more of that when I come back out in Guam and really show Addie some of the exciting things that have been happening in Guam that I think, frankly, folks in Puerto Rico and other territories could learn a lot from some of the things that Guam has been doing in this space. And hopefully, there's opportunities for folks in Guam to learn from some of the experiences of people like Addie as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so let's be sure we'll mention it now, but we'll also mention it later that there is an event that is coming up on August 28th at the Hilton Resort and Spa. And you'll have a chance to meet Neil and Addie and learn about sort of right to democracy. And so, por favor, if you have any questions, you can message me, or they are on social media. They have a great website with plenty of information on it. But I'm excited to have both of you, coming out to talk about this because, this is your approach that you are taking. It's something that is absolutely necessary in so many ways. It's just the territories speaking to each other more. The territories, though, sort of an approach to social justice on this issue, which is very specific to the territories, but also about unifying them. So I love it. I love it. I love it. And so,
I really
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I really appreciate that. I appreciate that Neil expressly recognize how we come into these efforts as recognizing that we are really just focusing on opening the doors to other efforts of self-determination that are and will be happening. I mean, for us in Puerto Rico, this issue has been the center of our political lives since forever. I mean, Puerto Rico was first a colony of Spain and then became a colony of the United States. And our political life is fraught, right, with divisions around the problem or the debates of status and self-determination. So there are many groups that have worked tirelessly to promote these efforts in Puerto Rico to get a significant process of self-determination with a varied approach in terms of the results they want after the self-determination takes place. So when Neil approached me and we started fashioning what right to democracy would be, we very pointedly define a set of values that I think are very important to share with the audience because mainly we focus, one of our biggest values is focusing our work in issues that will promote the systemic change that everybody is, striving for. Because social issues are connected with our governance and the colonial framework that we all share as territories. And how to do that without falling into the political fraud or the toxicity that often comes when people are debating about status, especially in Puerto Rico. That was very important for me. And we made it a value of the organization not to get into debates that will enhance divisions, but focus on the reality of the legal framework of colonialism that is built in the US constitutional law that we want to dismantle, and to do it in a way that brings together, and that's the other value, bringing together the different territories that are ruled under that framework. And how do we cross across territories, identifying that common ground And so embarking in this listening tour, where we are having actually dialogues based on popular education techniques to receive from the people that are living these conditions in the territories, their impressions, their ideas, even their suggestions on how we need to integrate them in this process of dismantling the colonial framework is invaluable. The experience of the dialogues in Puerto Rico have been super exciting. If some of them that participated are watching, my hats up, hello. We had 6 groups that participated in these dialogues. We were all very excited, and the energy that was created by being able to talk about colonialism without jumping at each other about our differences, but actually just expressing ourselves and recognizing on each other how we share, even if we have different views, was very enriching. And I'm so looking forward going on Thursday to VI, then going on August, I get to Guam on August 23rd, and I have a set of activities, including the lounge. And also, before I forget, I want to announce that we are going to celebrate also, we have been celebrating, we had a first interterritorial dialogue where we have people from all the territories in this version of Zoom talk about some issue. And the first one we had was on Hurricane Mawar, because for us, it was very urgent to kind of put out there that you from our brothers and sisters from Guam had just passed a hurricane category 5. And for us in Puerto Rico, that's really close to our hearts. And we suffered a lot on disaster recovery because of discrimination, because of inefficiencies of the system. And so we wanted to have that conversation as priority. And we had people from all the territories talking about their experience, because all of us share what you call typhoons and we call hurricanes, but it's the same thing, these huge storms, right? And now we're going to have another one. We will share, right, the announcement. Hopefully it will be the 24th of August. And it's going to be with veterans, because if there's another thing that we share as territories, is a huge amount of our population serves in the Army. And so there is per capita, the highest providers of soldiers to the US Army per capita is US territories, our US territories. So then when they come back, they suffer from lack of services, access to aid, et cetera, and that is very important for us to have veterans speak about their experiences in the territories. So just a couple of things to show you how we are trying to have those linkages between territories. We will do a report after the listening tour, and hopefully we will be able to bring more organizations from the Pacific and from the Caribbean territories to New York City to our big event, which is the summit in October.
And we can talk a little bit more about that now. One of the things that we really believe in terms of driving change in this space is that there needs to be a real ecosystem and movement around these issues. That, you know, this is something that does not receive a lot of national attention, where there's not strong solidarity between territories, between diaspora communities. There's not resources, financial resources from national funders or others to support these kinds of efforts. As we kind of say, this is simply, Guam and the other territories are just not on the map, either literally or figuratively, when it comes to these kinds of national issues. And so we're building from these dialogues and conversations we're having in each of the territories during these listening tours, towards what is going to be a very exciting 2-day summit on U.S. colonialism, October 25th and 26th in New York City. The first day is going to be bringing together partners from each of the territories, the diaspora, national advocacy organizations, to work together to develop strategies for how do we elevate and advocate for these issues at a national level. The second day, October 26th, at the Ford Foundation, those same folks from the territories, diaspora, and national groups are going to be meeting with leaders in philanthropy to educate them about the situation in each of the territories, what some of the harms of this undemocratic colonial framework have been, what's the need for advancing democracy and self-determination and indigenous rights in U.S. territories, and what can philanthropy do to be more engaged. And so as we come out to Guam in the coming weeks, we want to meet with people and talk with people who are interested in being parts of these conversations. You know, ultimately, we're very interested in trying to bring more resources out to Guam to support things like the Fanachu podcast, some of the work that's ongoing, things like the Fanogi Coalition and other groups, the Protect the Texan group, and others that are doing so much of this work on the ground that connects to these broader questions of the colonial relationship between the United States. So there is some interest that we've been getting from national philanthropy around these issues over the last few years. And with now the 125th anniversary of U.S. colonialism upon us, Guam has now been soon to become 125 years under the U.S. flag. It's an important time to have conversations around these issues, certainly in each of the territories, but also at a national level. And so we're really excited to talk with more people about this, as we come out at the end of the month.
No, so just must say, I love this approach because it's, one of the things, that I was, when I would spend time in the States, especially when I was getting my PhD, taking up the cause of the territories, as both of you know, can be difficult because I would literally be in some groups. I would sit in different sort of peace groups, anti-war groups, leftist groups, and they would be talking about issues and they would say, dismantle the US empire. They would say, stop US colonialism. And I would say, oh, I like this. I'm from Guam. Can we end US colonialism in Guam? And then all these people who in one moment were sort of the most critical people imaginable about US activities were suddenly like, but you don't like the United States, or aren't you a territory of the what? And so it was so
I'm not
funny.
talking about you.
Yeah, it was like, no, but don't you like being a colony? You're a good colony. And so it would be so frustrating because even some of the most critical conversations in the spectrum of American, ideology would have trouble seeing the territories as an issue. Mm-hmm. They would have, and so I wanted to hear from both of you sort of about that, because I think that what I love about your project is that it's pushing a conversation, in the United States, which a lot of people don't want to have, or they don't know how to have. They have no idea how to even engage in it, which is why a lot of times most people just respond to the voices from the territories with, well, how about we just give you more federal funds? Or how about we just let you vote for president? And some territories want that. Some people in territories would like that, but it misses the larger conversation about the relationship. And so I wanted to hear about your experiences, because I think this is something that all people in the territories share, is that the majority of the people in the United States still don't know what Puerto Rico is to the United States. And so for those of us who come from smaller islands, it's even more frustrating. So Addy, if you wanted to share, and then Neil after that.
Yes, definitely. First of all, recognizing with humility how little myself knew about Guam, even about U.S. Virgin Islands that is right across us, not even half an hour flight. And how little I knew of the history of struggle against the challenges faced under this colonial governance of the US in your lands. And 2 years after Hurricane Maria, I was recruited in Oxfam America, which is an international organization, to be senior advocacy, senior advocacy for Puerto Rico in Washington. And this happened because Hurricane Maria was a disaster that suddenly everybody discovered that Puerto Rico existed. And suddenly Oxfam and others discovered the level of poverty that exists in Puerto Rico. Like in Puerto Rico, 45% of our population is under the poverty level. And the hurricane kind of destroyed all the vegetation that was hiding that poverty. And then suddenly everybody knew about Puerto Rico in the United States. Of course, it was also helpful that President Trump started throwing papers to people when he come visiting here as, you know, as a very elitist way of saying we're here to help you. And it was very painful for me when I went to work for Oxfam America in Washington. I spent 2 years there. Always grateful for Oxfam's support to do this work. It was just very challenging to try not only to educate or to make people in the United States realize that Puerto Ricans have different points of view about what the result of self-determination should be, but more than that, that we have the capacity and more, not only to have good government, trying to convince people that we are not as inferior as you think. Having to have that conversation or having to have that necessity to prove ourselves, because there's all these myths around what we are as a, you know, as a nation here in Puerto Rico. And like you said, a lot of givings on how, oh, but why don't you guys become a state? Or why don't you guys become independent? And it's just a lack of recognition of the colonial reality and what that colonial reality builds culturally. I always, you know, I have been speaking to Neil every day for the last months about these issues. But one of the big conversations that we've had is how the insular cases, which are the cases that we are trying to revoke, which are the cases that build the colonial or define legally and legitimize the colonial relationship between the United States and the territories by creating the non-incorporated territory category and having us under the territorial clause, etc., is that this is not only a legal definition. This legal definition creates culture because legality is a form of culture that is embedded in the governance of a nation. And so it not only affects, and we have the book by Efren Rivera Ramos, a famous professor in Puerto Rico who wrote a book called The Legal Construction of Identity, because it's how the insular cases build the identity of governance and the governed in Puerto Rico. It brings dependency, it brings clientelism, it creates a local type of governance that is full of misgivings and is full of challenges because of how it is tied and that relationship of dependency with the imperial government. So, but when you go to the US, like that is the less spoken thing. It's like it creates culture there too, because the insular cases creates a culture of insidiousness towards the challenges that are faced in the territories, because the insular cases established we are less valuable. We are less good. You know, it literally says that we are savages, that we're people that don't know how to govern. And of course, that was, you know, that was more than 120 years ago, but still, they haven't been revoked. And still the Department of Justice relies on them to maintain some unilateral exercise of power over our territories. And so for us, it's this culture that you feel when you go to Washington, that there is a lack of knowledge of it, but at the same time, there is this tendency to just be very paternalistic sometimes, or very discriminatory other times, or just thinking that you don't have a capacity to sit on a table to make decisions and to build something better than what they are proposing. Like example number one, disaster recovery. We had huge problems with FEMA. We had big problems with other programs of disaster recovery because of the way they're built. They are not attending local needs and local issues because local people don't participate in the creation of these programs in ways that are significant. Anyways, I could go on and on about this, but I will just have to say that when I decided to go forward, I was very clear that for us, this is a matter of how do you bring agency to the people that are affected, and that it doesn't matter what Neil or I think about the result of self-determination. That's not the question here. The question here is, how do we cut the chain that is the legal framework that keeps the status quo alive and also maintains that culture of insidiousness and that culture of dependency, clientelism in the territories, how we cut that chain and then have the push, the political process that everybody's been pushing for from all sides actually take place, and that Congress has the obligation of actually opening the doors for a political process that is significant and that responds to the needs of self-determinations of each of the territories. And that's why we're so focused on revoking the insular cases as a way of doing it. And how do you insert community lawyering techniques, client-centered techniques, participatory advocacy to push for the revocation and the recognition of the colonial framework. Neil, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the narrative change that we want to, we are pushing for. You're on mute.
Yeah, I'll jump in and talk a little bit more about kind of, you know, to Michael's question of, you know, how do we kind of balance what should the focus of different advocacy be, and what are opportunities to kind of talk about colonialism today. And so, you know, I think one thing about both Addie and myself and Maguette, I would kind of count you in this group too, is we like to see stuff happen. We like to see stuff get done, and we're kind of impatient. Like, we don't want this to be something that, you know, some podcast 50 years from now is talking about the same issues. We'd like to see this get addressed and resolved, you know, sooner rather than later. And so some of it's like, well, what is possible within, you know, political realities and what opportunities are out there. And that's been something that's always informed kind of my approach and tactics over the years. And as new opportunities present themselves, I'm always open to being more aggressive and more ambitious in some of the things that we can achieve. And so I think there was an important moment following the death of George Floyd, where the United States began to have more of an interest in addressing some of these difficult issues of systemic racism. And so, the US has a lot of issues across that spectrum. Territories are one of them. There's a whole bunch of others. And that created opportunities to have a little bit more of a forward conversation at a national level around these issues. The other kind of point in history that I think has allowed for a broader conversation around these issues, and the slide you showed earlier showed it, to have a conservative Supreme Court justice like Neil Gorsuch recognize, quote, American colonialism, and to say that the insular cases have no place in our law and were founded on, racial views that should not be what defines the United States today. That also opens up opportunities to begin to talk about these issues in ways that before might have been alienating or perhaps even counterproductive to some audiences. And so now, that said, even as we have started talking about these issues with folks at a national level, using the word colony, colonial, I've had conversations with folks in Washington who say, oh, Neil, we can't admit that Guam or Puerto Rico were colonies. And I was like, well, why is that? Why can't you admit that? It's just the reality. That just is what it is. It's like, well, if we admitted they were colonies, then we'd have to do something about it. And I'm like, exactly. That's the whole point, that we need to recognize the reality that this is a colonial framework governing these areas, and that under the United States democratic and constitutional values, under international law, it's clear that there should be no colonies, no second-class citizens, and that these issues need to finally be addressed after 125 years. If not now, when? How long do people need to wait to tackle these issues?
Such a good point there. I really think that hits sort of the, because the territories live in sort of the area between the rhetoric and the reality. And so as long as sort of and this is one reason why a conversation around the colonies is so important, because even some of the worst colonizers in history at least acknowledged that they had colonies. And so and created some mechanism for them, some place for them. This doesn't excuse anything, but it gives a means in which there's a conversation around them and their treatment, which acknowledges first what they are to the empire, to sort of the center of power, et cetera. But in the United States, it's more difficult because you have the Department of Interior on the one hand. In Guam, for example, you have the US military, which has a big outsized role in these sorts of things. And every territory is a little bit different in certain ways. So in Puerto Rico, for example, Puerto Rico has a place in American politics, sort of Democrat, Republican politics in certain electoral, issues, and other territories don't play that role. I remember a meeting once.
I thought you were going to go with reggaeton or the artist direction.
That too. It's there's a lot more Puerto Ricans with Grammys and with MVP, MVPs than there are for the rest of us in the territories. And so, but that's the thing is even for, and Adi, I would love to hear, as somebody coming from Puerto Rico and from that situation, that context, because for those of us in the other territories, we kind of see that our issues are small. It's hard to get anybody to pay attention to them. But for Puerto Ricans who have a much larger presence, though, but still ultimately get stuck in a lot of the ways and the assumptions, right? That it's hard to make progress, or because of the assumptions that your average person might have about Puerto Rico in the United States, or your average politician might have about Puerto Rico. And so I wanted you to share your perspective coming from, because the rest of us all say, whichever, if something happens for Puerto Rico, then it might happen for the rest of us. because Puerto Rico is kind of the guiding boat in that sense. So what is your sort of experience or perspective on that?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And before delving in, I'm just going to say something about what we were talking about, the recognition that there is a problem in order to solve it. Like for me, it's as easy as saying, when you have a problem of alcoholism, the first step of being able to solve that problem is recognizing that you are an alcoholic. And you have to start every meeting with Alcoholic Anonymous saying, hi, my name is X and I am alcoholic. And having that step of reckoning with yourself. And this is not only, and for us in Right to Democracy, it's directed, we need the United States to recognize it has colonies, and that this colonial framework is racist, and that it cannot exist anymore, period, okay? But also implies responsibility for us. It implies responsibility for the people in the United States, Congress, the government, to open the door to self-determination. And it also implies responsibility for the people in the territories that they will have to own up in the sense of recognize their situation and also be willing to change, because there is a lot of fear of what will happen next, right? And us as professionals, we usually try to control the results of what's going to happen next. And I think that has become a mistake, like it has us stuck many times as professionals, because at the end, the only true self-determination is going to be the one that is actually practiced. Like, people need to practice democracy in order to be able to create it. It's not possible to just create it theoretically. You have to trust and have faith on the people in the territories and on the people that you are pushing for self-determination in order to do it. So it's our responsibility. The reckoning is our responsibility, not only for the mainland, but this is what we're focusing in. It's also our responsibility for us in the territories. And this is what these conversations and these exchanges, this common ground is about. And this flows into your question about my experience. And I'll just tell you, we were in the Virgin Islands a month ago or more, launching our organization. And a very esteemed colleague came and he's like, the Virgin Islands are victims of how big Puerto Rico is by their sides. And this is something that I've learned now, that all the challenges that the Virgin Islanders go, because Puerto Rico trumps everything, not only in the conversation, but in federal programs. Like, everything has to go to Puerto Rico in order to get to Virgin Islands. And we didn't know that, like, we don't know the effect of our existence in our brothers and sisters that are like half an hour away. And so this person, he comes to me and he says, Adi, you guys are so big, which it makes me laugh because, we're not that big, but you guys are so big and you have so many people in the diaspora. We are 3.2 million. We have like 4 million more in the diaspora. You guys can solve this tomorrow and we're gonna be left out because you have more political power. I see, and I was like, I see your point. Like, I see your point. We do have more political muscle because we have our family and friends in the US that actually can vote and they can press their politicians to do something, right? But nothing has happened. And it has been, okay, let's count since we became citizens, 1917. It has been more than 100 years where we have a little bit more of power if we move to the United States because we can vote. And nothing has happened. And we've had a lot of fights for self-determination. I am of the utmost security or set idea that if we don't open our eyes and we start building common ground with our territories, brothers and sisters from the other territories, if we don't transcend the little politics or the politics that are particularized and attack the big dragon, which is the capacity of the United States attribute itself to rule in a colonial way as a group, because we're all affected, we're not going to get anywhere. Puerto Rico is not going to get anywhere if it doesn't solve this for everybody else together. And we're not going to solve it unilaterally, because it has to be built by participatory common ground work. And it's for me amazing when I have the conversations with people from Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, even American Samoa and Virgin Islands, having those conversations and listening to how we identify so fast with each other, because we have stuff that is very similar, and we feel the pain that the other person is feeling. So that power, it's really what Right to Democracy brings to the table. It's something that we really are betting, and we are recruiting the help of others, especially the help of philanthropy, to realize how important it is to invest in building a movement that is cross-territorial and that brings social issues, but from the perspective of how do we overcome these social issues by dismantling the colonial framework.
And that's not to say that each of the areas needs to end up in the same location. That if one territory wants to go one direction and another territory wants to go a different direction, that's okay. And one of the kind of fun exercises we've been doing as part of the launch of our organization is what does a right to democracy mean to different people? To some people, and maybe I don't know if you can pull up the slide we have on that. To some people it means a right to self-determination. To others it means a right to vote for president, or a right to SSI benefits, or a right to have a say over military buildup. I think it might be earlier.
Which one?
So there's a slide that has like all of these different.
Oh, this one. Here we go.
Yeah, that it means something different to different folks, and this is one of the things we'll be doing at our event in Guam. People can express, what it means to them, and it should mean lots of different things. And I think that's one of the power of our approach, is that it allows people who have different understandings of what a right to democracy or what self-determination mean in terms of the result, to come together to say, we should have a right to democracy and self-determination, and that there should not be colonies. So these are just some of the conversations we're really excited to have more of when we come to Guam in a few weeks.
Oh, Biba. No, Hongan, I love this approach. I'm really looking forward to seeing you when you are here. So we have about a little more than 10 minutes left. We've had some questions, and so I wanted to give a chance to get to a few of those questions, although I love this, and I look forward to having both either of you or anyone else from Right to Democracy on in the future, because even just Adi, hearing about how your interactions with people from the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's important. It's important, and then because I think sometimes, for example, we may, it's funny because even when you said, when you were talking about islands and smallness and so on, it's that I've always been surprised, because in Guam, people feel like Guam is small, but when I've talked to Puerto Ricans, sometimes Puerto Ricans feel that Puerto Rico is small. And I say, no, Puerto Rico is huge. There's so many people. What are you talking about? No. And so that perspective is important because I think those of us in the territories need to meet each other as well. We need to hear from each other and learn from each other because we too can make assumptions about what the others are experiencing, what they're going through. And that's not, it's not beneficial for moving ahead. And so I appreciate that. And so Neil, I wanted to sort of give you this question first, and then Adi, if you have anything to add in. So the question though is, will you also be engaging with international entities? So the United Nations, the Fourth Committee of the United Nations, will you also be taking that avenue as well?
Yeah, that's an area we want to focus into. It's something that both Addie and I have done kind of on the margins over the course of our career, but that I wouldn't say we're experts in. And so that's one of the things as we've been meeting with folks in each of the territories, wanting to find the folks who are expert in that and developing strategies to collaborate and work together. Because that is an important part of the conversation and strategy, and one that I think there's still a lot more room to do more in. I mean, there's been a lot of work that has been done, but I think with some of these opportunities over the last few years, there certainly is more that can be done. And so absolutely, look, folks that are interested in elevating that aspect more, we'd love to hear more from them and find ways to work together on those issues.
From the perspective of Puerto Rico, and I guess the perspective of all the territories, one of them, and I think one of the main contributions that Right to Democracy is doing now from the get-go to the work that is being done in the international arena already is getting the United States to admit that it has colonies. That part of our mission is essential. Like if we have a president, Congress admitting that their governance is a colonial governance, it will give much more strength to the work that has been done. In Puerto Rico, we have how you call it? We have comparecido, we have presented before the Committee of the Anti-Colonialism in the UN 46 times. 46 times the committee has declared our right for self-determination as something that should be recognized, now. But it has never been elevated to the General Assembly. The General Assembly is controlled by the United States, is controlled by these, big powers. So this efforts that we have done for 46 years that has a very strong product, which is the declaration from the committee, has never been able to be elevated. But if the United States recognize that it has colonies, the argument of not having this mandate elevated to the General Assembly becomes stronger. And I think that from the get-go, that's a step that at least of the work that we're doing actually supports the work of international of organizations that are working at international level. And that is not to say that as part of this ecosystem that we're building, because we're building an ecosystem, and that's why we are going and doing these listening sessions in the territories. We want to identify those groups that want to commit in action towards dismantling the colonial framework in their areas of action. If we have an organization that wants to concentrate on international level, I don't know, whatever, litigation, advocacy, etc., it would be interesting to have them participate and even consider collaborating. Like Neil said, like we're really looking forward to finding those avenues of collaboration. We already have had conversations with several, so it's definitely on our radar.
Yeah, and I would say we are planning to do an interterritorial dialogue and event focused on the international aspect. So we'll announce that, in the coming months. And I would just say, there's some people who say, oh, is it either international or domestic? And as Addie explained, think it really has to be both. The international work helps influence and make opportunities more available at the domestic level, and vice versa. The domestic work allows to build pressure from the international side. So I think it's something that it needs to be integrated more. It needs to be part of a broader strategic plan, and one that brings together folks from the different territories, from other national actors. And we have had some really positive conversations with some big national organizations that want to focus more through that lens as well.
Oh, Jesus Masi, thank you so much. So we're actually getting more questions, and we may, if it's okay with the two of you, I know it's later where you're at, we may stay a little past the hour. Because I do want to, there's two main questions that I want to get to. One question we have that's come in is, can you speak to the spirit of fear and dysfunction people of the territories face as a result of long-term colonization, and how to go about healing? So the challenge is getting to a place to exercise these kind of conversations. And so, we've talked about 125 years under the United States, but even prior to that, many of the U.S. territories have longer histories of colonization under the Spanish or other entities. And so, can you say anything to sort of that issue of how that perhaps what the question is asking is, that how has that history kind of prevented us from being more open to these conversations in the territories? How can we get past that? And so any thoughts that you have about that? And Addie, let's, if you don't, go ahead, and then Neil after that.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the question, because I was thinking about it like in the last segment and I didn't go into it, but of course I have studied these issues or this from a theoretical perspective in my doctorate. Precisely, how do you break with the stagnation that is created by oppression? Oppression as the form of colonies produces very similar symptoms. They produce dependency, clientelism, but also fear and hopelessness. And when you see that in these conversations, when I'm having these conversations within the territories and confirm, right, what was, what a sociologist had written about Puerto Rican culture and how Puerto Rican culture has been affected by colonialism, and how even the divisions that we have within between our people, we see that we also have divisions between the territories. Like, for example, we have issues here with the Jones Act, with the ships, right? But that doesn't apply to Virgin Islands, and that makes us confront each other in terms of economically. We are competing against each other instead of, being able to go with our similarities. We focus more on our differences. We focus on the economical disparities or the economical competition. We focus on the fact that St. Thomas or St. John's and St. Croix are very resented that everything that is federal has to go to Puerto Rico, instead of let's focus in our similarities. And I bet you anything, and I've known a little bit about this, and you guys know more. The same thing happens with Guam and CNMI. There are differences. There are divisions that separate you and doesn't lead to productive conversations that will actually make you hope, or that will actually make you be less fear because you are accompanied. Having this knowledge that you are accompanied in a tribulation is very important. And so for us, having the listening tour has been invaluable because we are trying to move above what separates us to build that, to identify that common ground. And if we are able to build a movement around that common ground, that is why I'm so certain that we can push for change, because being accompanied kind of help us being less afraid, and help us have more faith on each other, and kind of like break that cycle, because it is a cycle of oppression that affects colonies, and it's normal, right? But we have to recognize it and work with it.
I'll approach it from maybe a little bit of a different angle, where one of the other things that Addie and I have seen in talking with folks in each of the territories and just our own experiences is how much one of the obstacles to change in this space is actually people in each of the territories who believe that they are benefiting from the colonial relationship. So there are certain elites and certain people who see themselves at the top of the hierarchy of this colonial system and say, wait a minute, let's not upset the apple cart, like I'm on top. And it's like, oh, well, but like things would be better for everyone, including yourself, if we were able to have more agency over the decisions that impact us. And their view often is like, that's all well and good, but I just know I'm on top now. So I actually don't want change. I don't want anything that upsets that, even if maybe it would be good for people. And so I think having some honest and difficult conversations about some of those internal obstacles of people who have kind of been co-opted by or are part of some of these, often with the best of intentions, that's like another area that is a challenge to addressing these issues in each of the territories.
Oh, thank you, Sidus Masi. Thank you both for your responses there. And I wanted to give a chance for one more question. We've had a few more, but I want to make sure we get to this one though. And so as we have mentioned so far, there is the and it's the 125th anniversary of sort of the taking of many of the U.S. territories, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, by the United States in the Spanish-American War. And so in the Smithsonian and the National Portrait Gallery, there is at present an exhibit. And so one of the last question that I want to get to today deals with that sometimes having these conversations, focusing it around like the politics or sort of the formal aspects of it is tough for people to kind of get their heads around. And so does art or do exhibits like this have sort of a greater potential to reach people? And so I've put the link to sort of the virtual page for this exhibit into the live stream on Facebook, and so you can check it out. But it has different sections from the territories, and I think, you know, in some ways this is and then they include Hawaii in it as well. It's a huge sort of step ahead in terms of the national conversation around this, providing sort of a clear sort of recognition of that how should we think about this and remember this. And so and I would love to see sort of response pieces in the territories, response exhibits of different forms, which kind of take this, because one of the things that I think was limiting that, at least for some of the small, like for Guam, for example, is that in the Smithsonian, they may not have many things about Guam that they can actually use in their exhibit. And so to really kind of tell that story, so I think it would be nice. But so Neil, for you first, and then Addie, sort of how can we think about engaging in this in other ways, using things such as art or exhibits, culture? And so Neil, your thoughts.
Yeah, so it wasn't a coincidence that we launched Right to Democracy actually the day before the Smithsonian 1898 exhibit opened. And that's really how much importance we think, and this is one of the core things that our work focuses on, is this kind of narrative and cultural change, that exhibits like this have a powerful, serve a powerful role to educate and engage audiences in ways that, maybe a legal brief or a letter to President Biden aren't able to do in the same way. But I do think that I had a similar reaction maybe to yours after seeing the exhibit, and the curators did a great job, I think, within the confines they had. But I just kind of got the sense going through the exhibit that this was historical, that this was just a historical situation that didn't necessarily have a lot of current relevance today. And that's what the unfortunate reality is that, the 1898 beginning of American colonialism is the 2023 continued lived experience of that. So finding ways to engage this through the arts, I think, is a very critical component. And great timing. Addie, do you want to talk a little bit about one of the projects we hope to launch in the coming weeks?
Sure. And before moving to the project, for me, it was definitely fascinating to walk through this exhibit. Being from Puerto Rico and only mostly looking, this part is what I know, right? I know the Puerto Rican history of our colonialism, but walking through the halls and looking at how it was pictured in other places. And we got to the Guam part, the curators were actually very humble and honest in saying we were not able to get much more than what we got. And it was this reflection, right, of the distance, of the I don't say the quality, but the characteristics of the colonialism that has been lived by Guam, and not to say all the destruction that Guam has faced because of the wars and the bombing and the militarization, etc., etc., etc. So for me, it was just like this strong reflection, very shocking, very important. And having the people from Hawaii there, I have to say, it was amazing to hear them. They were very, and I would say, empowered at their capacity to denounce the oppression that they face as a peoples, even if they have already passed, as a state for years. They still were expressing the Hawaii delegation was huge, and they were expressing their feelings. This painting of Queen Lili o Lani, I say it wrong, but this painting of the Queen, they celebrated a right in order to be able to put it where it was in the museum. And this, how they treasured it and how they denounced the oppression that they were objected to, was very significant for me, right, as a territory of the United States, and what it means, right, and the oppression that we have lived. So definitely for me, groundbreaking to have this type of exercise of art being get together. And Neil and I have already, before even this exhibition, spoken about different types of things that we want to do moving forward to involve art. We are starting with, a humble approach. As I said, we've already been doing dialogues with different groups across the territories, and this is more like conversation. But we are doing to integrate the younger generation. When I say younger, it's like kids. We want to integrate kids in this by doing an arts competition. We're going to do an arts competition and they're going to be competing with expressive arts projects, answering the question of what is a democracy? What does the democracy means to you? And we will have painting, we will have poetry, and we will have oratory and music. So they could do whichever type of expressive arts work they want to do. And we are going to launch it not this week, the next one, in the schools, in hopefully, and I think I'm just touching wood, on all the territories. We're going to be able to launch with the beginning of the school year. And it is a way of integrating. We value very much the voice of the young people. We are doing, one of the dialogues we're doing is 15 to 25 years old. This competition is going to be like 12 to 17. So we want to get younger people to express themselves, because we really value the perspective of what is our future, to integrate that perspective in our work and have them express their needs and their perspective of what democracy means to them.
And helping us with that project and other ones in Guam is Sarah Netadog, who we're very excited to have started working with over the last few weeks and months, and really appreciate her help as we lead up to our trip to Guam and beyond. She's been a real pleasure to work with.
Definitely. Thank you, Sarah. I don't know if she's watching.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you both for all that you have shared today. And let's do one more reminder to everybody that the upcoming event on August 28th at 5 p.m. at the Hilton Resort. This will be part of the listening tour that has been discussed. And so I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. And you know, that this is a great chance to connect the voices, you know, of the people in the territories. Because I think as we all feel here, right? The territories are something that a lot of, when we interact with others in the United States, they feel it's too complicated, it's too different. And so, but that's, you know, this is our reality. And we need to find more ways to get people to recognize, you know, that, and so I appreciate all that you've shared. I want to give you one last chance for each of you. If you have any final thoughts that you would like to share or final pitches, please do. And so, Addie, you can go first, and then Neil will finish off with you.
Well, first, I'm just thrilled that I will be traveling there on the 21st of August. And I know I'm going to be eating a lot and very good. So I'm also thrilled because I'm going to taste all these good things and get to know you personally and all these wonderful people that I've been meeting. So I am just very happy to be able to do this work with my colleague, Neil. And the other thing is, I was going to ask you to put the last slide in our deck where you have our social media, so that people that are watching actually give us like in what, you know, I don't even know the name, like Twitter has changed to X or whatever, like just follow us on Instagram. We are at Right to Democracy, and we are doing these conversations, interterritorial conversations, #territories talk. So the second one is going to be on August 24, and it's going to be with our veterans. So just please be connected to our media and just keep talking.
So I would say one thing about Addie is she loves nature and the outdoors. And so I'm really excited to show her the beauty of Guam, hoping to get out to some of the beautiful hikes and areas around the island, introducing her to all the amazing people on the island, and absolutely making sure she gets as much red rice and kelaguen as she can possibly.
Biba, and so Sidus, Neil, and Addie, yes, and we will make sure that while you are here, we will host well. We will get you plenty to eat. You will probably have trouble leaving the island because you will be so. But thank you to both of you for joining. And so remember, for those of you watching and listening, Right to Democracy. And so I really want to highlight for everyone that one of the larger goals here is just making political status something which everybody in the territories realize that it affects their lives. Move out of this idea that political status is only for the person who holds a sign protesting down the street, or only somebody who jumps military fences, or only for sort of your cousin who went off to college in the States and comes back and just wants to protest all the time. No, these issues affect all of us. And so for us in the territories, a greater awareness of how our political status affects us, and it will lead us to a greater understanding about how we can change it. And so Right to Democracy, I appreciate everything that you are all doing, and I look forward to joining you here on island later this month. Remember, August 28th, 5 p.m., the Hilton Hotel. You can message me, or you can check out their website, righttodemocracy.us. Follow them on social media for more information. But si Diyos masino hamzanados, thank you to the two of you. Este fanakpo este episode, adios, este ki otro manalihitalo.